All right, I think we're live. So, welcome everybody. I have a very exciting guest for you guys today. I'm so excited to introduce you to my good friend, Erik Sorenson. Erik is here to talk about living an inspired life and breaking the beliefs, the habits, right? And the things that really can't come with us when we're scaling our businesses, stepping into our highest level of impact, and also just cultivating a really good life well lived. Erik is an international speaker, author, podcaster, coach, marketer, and dynamic international speaker. With a career spanning over 2 decades, Erik has established himself as an expert in the advertising industry, having worked with several Fortune 500 and 1,000 clients. His companies to date have generated nearly $100 million in revenue. But Erik's impact expands far beyond the corporate world. He's a firm believer in empowering individuals to unlock their true potential, and his speaking, training, and coaching platform is a testament to his life. With a passion for helping others, Erik inspires and motivates individuals to rise above their limitations and achieve greatness. He's also a prolific author, having co-authored 2 best-selling books, and his latest book, Commit First, which we'll be diving into, has been featured in Forbes, Inc. magazine, Financial Times, and has spoken on TED stages. In addition, his company has made magazine's 5,000 best companies in the US for the last 3 years in a row. When Erik is not busy conquering the business world, he prioritizes his family and personal pursuits. He's a proud father of 10, husband and serial entrepreneur, marathon runner, Ironman triathlete, and instrument-rated pilot. Hello, Erik. So excited to have you on board today.
So good to see you, Melissa. Good to be here.
Great. So you've built nearly $100 million in revenue while raising 10 kids. I would love to know how you define success now and what it took for you to stop chasing the wrong version of it.
Wow, that's an interesting question. Success meant something totally different in my 20s than it did in my 40s, for example. And I think success now is really redefined by a couple of things. Number one, like what impact do you make in the world and what impact do you make on your family? And sometimes there's an imbalance between those two, right? Because there's times where I'm making such an impact in my business and in the business world with the clients and the people that I serve, and maybe not so much in the home, and sometimes vice versa. So there's always this constant push-pull scenario where you're trying to make sure that you can create an extraordinary business and still have an extraordinary life.
Mm.
So for me, that's how I define success. In the beginning, though, I think I defined it more as how much revenue am I producing? Am I growing?
Mm.
Am I building wealth? It was much more internal. It was much more about me. And
Yeah.
I think you get to the point where if you're chasing money for years, it just seems like, and chasing success, it seems like it always tends to move in front of you, sort of like when you get
Mm.
close to the goal, you move the goalposts back even further and then further, and it's like you're chasing a horizon and you never really get there.
Mhm.
But when you start focusing on impact, I think that really shifts things from looking inside to looking externally, and I think to me like that makes so much more of a difference in terms of now how I find success versus before, and it's just so much more fulfilling when you're moving towards impact and trying to change a life.
That makes a lot of sense, and I love that personal tweak on it because you're right. A lot of people, they spend their entire time life chasing, right? The paycheck, the raise, and almost waiting to start living when they reach this thing that seems to always be out in the future. But we're also so hungry to make an impact on the world and to change these people's lives. If you're, a coach, a practitioner, or you're just a conscious entrepreneur who wants to do good, sometimes we fail to realize though that our impact zone is also the people in close proximity, meaning like the very little humans we're raising. And I love that you approach both. I've also noticed that in my personal career, the times where I was so laser focused on the income, the money, and the sort of my version of success were the times where I needed it the most. And the more that we start to actually align with those higher levels, right, of income and success and impact, the more we don't necessarily need as much to feel fulfilled. And then we give ourselves more choice to go play and adventure and have downtime or do the things that really make life meaningful.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, I think if you chase money, you probably will make money. You just chase success, you'll
For sure.
probably reach some level of success. But I found that when you chase impact and
Mm,
like the mark you can leave in this world before you die,
yeah.
you'll get both. You'll get both impact and income. And so I found that like that to me is like much more of a more fulfilling success formula because money it comes and goes, but impact can last forever. Like let's say you created a product that made somebody's life better.
Yeah.
Guess what? It likely is going to make their life better forever versus you give somebody a few dollars or you make a few dollars, which
Yeah.
likely are going to be gone by the end of the day or maybe by the end of the week. And then all of a sudden it's like replaceable, and impact is it's just lasting. It's just fulfilling and it never goes away.
It's so amazing to see that, and I think sometimes we're also trained in the entrepreneurials to ask the wrong questions. Like, I know some of the
Yes.
coaches I've trained under, they were asking me to tap into today to get a sale, to get a client, and it's this chasing energy rather than, "What can I do to make my program so good that it freaking changes people's lives, knock their shoes on?" And then, of course, by nature, the money arrives just because there's such a good thing that you are, like, 10 out of 10 confident on, and it's a different approach of value add versus trying to get something. And I think people also feel that too when they're considering someone to work with.
It's funny because, a lot of especially when I was working with vendors and other people in the past, it was really easy to tell who wanted to be a friend with me because they were going to make money off of something I was doing.
Hmm.
In other words, that my relationship with them was based on how much I was spending with them at the time.
Okay.
And I know when I shifted vendors or shifted partnerships or whatever, those relationships went away. And I actually hated that so much that I decided to change that and stop seeing people based on the amount of money they spent or invest in you, and start seeing people for people. Like,
Mhm.
to me, people have value whether or not they're spending money with me or I'm spending money with them. And to me, like, when you can build something lasting and
Mhm.
not have it based on something that, is like money, then you could build real relationships, especially in the world of AI that we live in today. To me,
Oh, yeah,
relationships are the new currency. They're also the old currency, but it's sort of like come full circle now. You can no longer trust what you hear, see, watch online at all because AI is so good and it's so close to real human interaction. You can't
for
tell the
sure.
difference a lot of times. But you know what you can tell? You can perceive is authenticity, like real relationships. And we're missing that so much, especially in business, because I get it. We want to save time with AI and we
Mhm.
want to like be as efficient as possible. But when it comes to it, we are and we become the people we're surrounding. And our businesses are only going to grow as much as our relationships inside those businesses and even outside of those businesses will grow because businesses are about people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the downfall of like the coaching industries or the not so great parts of the industry where people are almost like this MLM, just selling things to make more money rather than actually pursuing like the long term, right, of continuity, of community connection, or even being like the pattern interrupt that, wakes somebody up and helps them through something massive. Now, I love the word authenticity. And on one of our first calls together, you shared an amazing not fact, but a study that was just it totally blowing up my mind. Do you want to share what your thoughts are on authenticity?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. You hear the word authenticity. It's almost used too much. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. We need to be our authentic selves and not be somebody online that we aren't, like at home, for example. Um, but I didn't realize the power of what that was. And in fact, it started before I learned about the study. I was looking at entrepreneurs and I just had this question constantly. Like, I would see some of my friends that own businesses, and all of a sudden, like, kind of like most of us do in the life cycle of a business, we struggle for a really long time. And then
Mhm.
something ends up inevitably happening if you stay in it long enough and you don't quit, where all of a sudden you have like sort of this breakthrough. All of a sudden it seems like you're like an overnight success, right? Obviously,
So
there's no
true.
such thing as an overnight success. An
Yeah,
overnight success just means that nobody saw what you were doing for 20 years or 5 years or 10 years in the
yeah.
dark behind closed doors to reach that level of success where you look like an overnight success. And it
Mhm.
was funny, I was reading a book by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, Be Your Future Self Now. I know you're a big fan of of
10x,
Ben
yeah.
Hardy and his work. And in that book, he talks about the thesis he did when he was studying, I believe it was for his master's degree, or may have been his doctorate. And he talked about like he wanted to know the moment of that breakthrough, like what usually happened. And he mentioned in that book that it was almost always an investment in oneself, even a financial investment in oneself, where
Mm,
all of a sudden, like they had a breakthrough. And I've noticed that same thing when people and entrepreneurs invest in themselves and they
mhm.
really step into like their true authentic self. It's amazing like how things just all of a sudden start connecting
Yeah.
and things start working. And I notice when people just finally stop being who someone else wants them to be and be their true self, as flawed and as challenging as sometimes that is, things like you tend to connect with people more and more people will come into your world. Well, fast forward to the Spain study, and like as you know, everything is sort of energy. Like right now, we have cell phones, right? And there are voices going through air from here to wherever. Like I can pick up this phone and I can call somebody in London, England right now live. Like how crazy is that we live in a world where that happens? There's radio waves, there's microwaves all going through the air at the same time. And we don't really perceive that.
Mhm.
What's interesting is our emotions have energy frequencies as well. And when I first heard that, I thought it was a little bit weird, but what they did is in the Spain study, they wanted to understand what frequencies certain emotions have. Think of emotions like joy, happiness, fear, failure. Like emotions really do create as energy. Like if we're feeling sad, it's a very different energy than if we're feeling joy. So what they did is they wanted to isolate the frequency so they could measure what was coming from the human body, not necessarily from all of these outside energies that are constantly flowing, around us. And so they put people in a Faraday cage. And if you know what a Faraday cage is, basically, if you have like a Faraday bag and you put your cell phone in it, no outside frequencies can actually enter that Faraday cage. So it blocks basically all energy frequencies. So they went in and they would have these conversations. They put these people in a Faraday cage and they would ask them, and they would try to see what emotions they were feeling by just looking at the frequencies. And they were able to determine what's the frequency for joy, what's the frequency for happiness, love, connection, all of these things. But the wild thing about the study is they kept seeing a frequency and it was actually 10 times higher than any human emotion. And they couldn't figure out what it was. So they just kept like probing and asking and try to study what this was. And they discovered something that was so powerful. And that's this. And you probably guessed it. They found that authenticity is 10 times higher than any other human emotion, including that of fear, that of happiness, that of love, that of joy. You know, if you were to ask me, like, what's the highest frequency and highest energy level of a human emotion, I would have said probably joy,
Yeah.
maybe faith or love,
Mhm.
but it's actually authenticity because we can feel what other people are feeling. Like if you're married, you know this. Like you can walk into the room and you know if your wife is not happy. You don't even have to ask the question. You just feel
Yeah.
it when you walk in. Like I think we're so much more feelers than we think that we are. And when
Mhm.
you realize, like when you're even on a camera right here and you're being your true authentic self, people can feel that. And people will trust authenticity because it's real in a world that there's a lot of fake.
It makes so much sense, and it's funny because in the spiritual communities too, we have this belief like love is the highest frequency, and we're like, "Eh, no, I don't know." But, specifically, like, on an energetic or intuitive, like, on a clairvoyant level, right? If I'm tapping into authenticity, it basically means all of me is welcome here. The quirks, the genius, the weirdness, maybe the shadowy parts that I don't love so much and would rather hide, they're all welcome, right? So I can imagine that by us actually allowing us to playful out, be 100% the way that we are without filtering or trying to divorce like these parts of us, then it would by nature create so much more, energy currency because you're not blocking anything. Like it's all just allowed, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I know that we had something interesting happen. So my fiance and I, long story short, we used to have like a marketing agency that we co-owned, and we were doing this brand photo shoot last year. And we were like thinking about it. He has a tattoo here. I've got a tattoo here. And we're like, okay, we're going to track business owners. I know that I'm a very morally ethical person, but with a tattoo, how does that look in terms of branding? And at first we were considering like wearing turtlenecks or trying to cover it up. And then I was like, wait a second, I don't want to do business with anyone that's got a problem with me having a tattoo. Like if I'm going to attract someone that's not going to do business because we have a tattoo, like that's not who I want to work with. So this was this unveiling of no, like let's give ourselves full permission to be exactly as we are because this is ultimately who we are. So I think it's great to incorporate that in life and to also realize that sometimes the best people are attracted to you, right? Colleagues, relationships, allies, affiliates, literally because you're just radiating in a zone that, they are. Amazing. So, what is something that you used to think is impossible for you that now feels completely normal?
Wow. Yeah, you taught me something just a few weeks ago that I hadn't really thought about, and that was making your level of success not just like something that's impossible, but something that's just completely normal.
Oh, normalizing it.
Like normalizing the level of success that you have. And I've thought about that a lot since you said that because one of the things that I like, one of my missions in life, and I'm pretty clear about what those are,
Mm.
but it is helping people get to a point where they're living a life they once thought impossible, but it's now possible. In fact, it's actually happening. Um, and for me, like the impossible life was to be able to run a successful business
Mhm.
that doesn't run me. To build a business that I own that doesn't own me, because I would say,
Mm.
gosh, 85, 90% of my career in the last 20, 25 years has been businesses that own me. In other words, I'm slave to them. If I go away for a day or two, it falls apart. Like I'm hustling, struggling, challenged. Like I was the hustle guy. When I got into business, actually was really good at figuring out how not to run a business. In fact, I look back, I was terrible at business and I'm still not that great at it. But the challenge was, I guess the blessing was there were two things that did help me. I was hungry and
Mhm.
I was hustling. And hustling, like the ability to hustle is a great blessing in the beginning of a business. It's a
Yeah.
massive curse 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
Because if you stay in that mode, all of a sudden you're capping your own potential. You're capping your business's potential. Why?
Yeah.
Because you're trading time for money. If you want to be poor, trade time for money.
Mhm.
If you realize that like wealthy people, they value time over money.
Mhm.
People that don't have a lot of money, they value money over time. See the difference? And so anytime you're trading time for money, you're always limited by the amount of hours in a day. Until I discovered this beautiful, incredible gift, which is the gift of leverage. Time multiplied by time equals more time. Time
Mm.
multiplied by leverage is infinite time. Like for example, Melissa, if you said to me, "Hey, I got to plow a road in the jungle, and it's a mile long. How long is it going to take me?" And I would say, "Well, if you have a shovel, it might take you several lifetimes. If you have a small tractor, it might take you 2 or 3 years. If you have a bulldozer, you could probably have it done in a week. Same outcome, completely different leverage points." So
Interesting.
one of the things that I learned is like, if you want to make your impossible possible, it's pretty tough to do it living in the mode of automation that you're currently living in. In
Mhm.
fact, that's where we're talking about like there's a hidden force controlling your life completely. And until you learn how to harness it, it's going to be very difficult for you to live the impossible life. And the sad part about this is when we were young, all of us had these crazy dreams.
Yeah.
Like, can you believe how audacious we were to dream big back in the day?
Yeah.
I look at my 7-year-old right now. I'm telling you right now, this kid doesn't believe there's any limitations in life right now.
That's insane. I love it. Nurture,
What if
preserve that.
we could have that now? Like that same imagination like we did when we were a child, but then we grew up. We were told to get smart. We were told to get an 8 to 5 job. We were told to do it this way and that way, dress this way, like these things, follow these channels on social media. And so much we're living based on the conditioning that we've been brought up in
Yeah.
and not from the outside in versus living from the inside out. And so to me, like when you're breaking through in life, that's just a point where all of a sudden your impossible becomes possible. And when I say impossible, like not with a capital I, like defying gravity,
Mhm.
but defying gravity in your life, the equivalent of that. Like that impossible dream that you had when you were a kid, what if that could actually be true? And I'm telling you right now, if you start thinking and believing that it could actually be true, then you can like tap into this hidden force that's sort of controlling your life, at least roughly 93% of it.
Yep.
And it's amazing. One quick story. I hear quite often when I'm working with my clients and the business owners that we help build them say, like, I'm living a life I didn't think was possible 3 years ago.
That's
Like, that's
amazing.
like the greatest thing
Yeah.
that I could ever hear because that just fuels my fire to change more lives. And in a sense, I'm living that right now, versus before it was just hustle nonstop. And I thought that was the way. And I realized when I discovered a few things in my life that I can actually run a business that doesn't run me. And I can actually, um, as my business grows and expands, my freedom can actually grow and expand, not the other way around.
This is so powerful. It's really like an attestation to the work that you're doing, and we saw that in the community, right? I joined one of your platinum partners calls, and it's crazy to see that these business owners are coming in and 10xing their business consistently over and over and over again, and you're living sort of like the living proof, right? The living testament that it can be true. But we do have to allow ourselves to kind of unlearn some of the things we've bought and sold as truth, right? Think some of the things we've grown up around, some of the things that we've been taught that are just tied to outdated industries, right? Or
Yeah.
time moments in humanity. Like we're not built for the Industrial Revolution anymore. We're sending kids to school for these long days that were tied back to, say, factory workers, right? So what advice do you have for people who are listening? Or maybe actually, I think we could go a bit deeper. So could you share a bit about your becoming story and some of the beliefs or things that you had to challenge, do differently, and rewrite in order for you to actually start getting traction, in order for you to also build the empire that you have today?
Yeah, and I think I'll start by saying, like, the more I learn and the more I grow, the more I realize how much I don't know.
It's a great
Because
paradox.
it's amazing. Like, 10 years ago, I would have thought I knew a lot. Now, with as much learning as I dove into in the last 10 years, I
Mm,
realize, like, how much is out there that I just don't know. And I think one of the things that we fall entrapped to is believing something that we absolutely believe it's true, and we would die on a hill for this thing that we believe is true, only to find out, like, maybe years later that, oh, that actually wasn't accurate and correct, and it's actually hurting my life.
mm,
You mentioned my story before. I just was the hustle guy, and I went to college. I started working in, like, broadcasting and marketing, advertising, sales. Then I ventured off the 9 to 5 with no clients, no experience, starting an ad agency. And again, I just hustled. I hustled my way from 0 to almost $10 million a year in a few years,
mm.
and it was a challenging road, and I realized I stayed there for a very long time because I was capped, because I was trading time for money constantly. But I remember going to work and sometimes not coming home 2 days later. I
Wow.
remember, like, waking up early. I remember traveling a lot just to see clients, and I was just trying to over deliver so much, to the
Mm,
point where that's great in the beginning, but I hadn't had enough pain of doing that over and over and over for years
yeah,
for me to change anything about it. You realize that you won't change and I won't change until the pain of change
this is
becomes less
huge.
than the pain of staying the same.
Yeah.
So I didn't have enough pain built up in my life for me to finally make a change to say, okay, like, I'm going to lose my family if I keep doing this, or I'm going to lose my life. I'm going to miss out important milestones in my children's lives. And I'm just building a business and ignoring the rest of life.
Mm.
Well, it came to the point where, sure enough, I did it long enough where it started destroying me, basically. And I remember things got really challenging, really difficult. I ended up exiting out of that business. So here I am at some point in my life, unemployed, went through divorce, sitting there in this house, empty house, thinking all about, how in the world did I get here? Because I thought I was a successful person. And I remember during that dark time, it was, I I can only talk about it now because I've told the story so many times on stage, but
Mhm.
essentially, I read a quote that woke me up. I mean, it literally changed the entire course of my life, and that's this: that the scariest day of your life is the day you die, when the person you are meets the person you could have become.
Oh,
And for
ouch.
me, it
Yeah,
was like this.
yeah.
And I was there just thinking of myself, thinking about, like, it was all about me, realizing that I'm nowhere near the person I could become. And I committed for the first time in my life that the day I die, the person I am will be the person I could have become. And for some reason, it lit this unquenchable fire that will not go away. And that was, gosh, that was 2018, 2017, something like that. So it's been almost 8 years since that happened. And it changed my entire life. And I actually did something that I hadn't done since college. I picked up a book. And I'm like, "Whoa, this is really good." And then I picked up another and another. And each book I read would reference, like, other books. So I picked up another book, and I found myself reading a book a week for several years, actually. And I went a little crazy because, I didn't really have much going on. And so I went to almost, 7 Tony Robbins events in 1 year. I went to
Wow.
UPW. I went to Date with Destiny. I went with, to, I mean, you name it. It was incredible. And I experienced, and I learned all these things. And I started hiring coaches and investing in myself for the first time. And that's when I finally learned how, like, what life is about. I started, for some reason, I would became obsessed with neuroscience
Mm,
and, like, what makes people change. I wasn't trying to change anyone else, mind you. I was not trying to create what I've created today. I was trying to solve my pain. I was
yeah.
grasping at straws, trying to get rid of the pain and the challenge and the frustration and really the depression that I was going through, and trying to fix myself. That's all I was trying to do. So far that I hired one of the best neuroscientists in the country for an entire day, and I sat down with her for 12 hours, trying to dive into neuroscience and how does it work in my mind, and how can I like rewrite my stories? How can I reprogram my brain? How can I get rid of beliefs that are hurting me, not helping me? Beliefs about myself, limiting beliefs, things that are holding me back, and how do I step into my true authentic self? And it was a 4 or 5 year journey. To this day, I still study neuroscience because it's so I'm not really this geek out kind of person in the science world, but I just love neuroscience because I just love the science of change.
Love that.
And that's when everything started changing for me. I finally started investing in myself, and all of a sudden I started figuring out, I started a business, and grew that really well over the last few years. And I actually exited that, sold it to a private equity firm last year. And I started Platinum Partner as well, which is an effort to build the business that builds the business owner.
Love
And so
this.
to bring this full circle, you asked about like, how did I change these beliefs? Well, one a great example of that is in the Platinum Partner Group. Before, when we were first starting, we would help install beliefs that create success. Because I truly believe like you really can't have success until you install like success that other people have had until
Mhm.
you install the beliefs that create that success. The
Mhm.
problem is I was installing beliefs on top of a foundation of broken beliefs.
Oh,
And I'm like, ooh, so the foundation's cracked and I'm building this home on top of a cracked foundation.
yeah.
What I realize is when we go in and we break beliefs, in other words, when you break something by nature, it has to be replaced with something, right?
Mhm.
And you break the belief, and then all of a sudden you can install a new empowering belief and people's lives can change. I've actually seen this. Have you ever seen this on video before where people will like break a belief and you can actually see the video of the brain and the neural
Dreams.
connections and they release. There's
Yeah.
myelin surrounding these synaptic connections and the myelin just releases. And all of a sudden then over here, this new belief forms. It's a physical wiring in our brains,
Yeah.
in our software. And I've seen it, like it's wild. But I had to, and we could talk further about that, but I had to break my own beliefs first. And
Mm.
by the way, when I'm saying beliefs, I'm not talking religion here. I'm talking about beliefs about yourself, about the way the world is, about the way that things should be,
Yeah.
and then start installing new beliefs.
It's so powerful. I really, really love that. And you're right. It's the foundation. Sometimes it's like when we have these new success beliefs or how we ideally should be thinking or want to think, sometimes the manifestations or the outer results can actually reach us if we're still holding that perceptual filter that will say, oh yeah, but this time you failed, or oh, but your dad said if you're going to be an entrepreneur, then you're destined for, I don't know, it's irresponsible. Those competing things sometimes almost cancel each other out. So I love what you said about the approach of actually rewriting it by first letting go and unraveling some of the things that can't come with you. For the person who has started on the sprint of like hustle, right, and trying to get things in motion, and now is at this new phase where they see that their next level comes through scaling, right, traction, leverage. What are the key beliefs there, or the things to look at that you see in your clients?
Well, here's the belief that needs to be broken. If you want something done right, you have to
Do it
do
yourself.
it yourself.
Yeah.
Wow, big lie. And it's a social norm. We hear this all the time. If you
Yeah.
want something done right, you have to do it yourself. That is the hustle culture. Here's the challenge. When you're hustling, you become the bottleneck in your business.
Hmm.
If you're like most business owners, you're hustling, you're grinding, you start hiring employees. Guess who they go to for every question? How do I do this? How do we do that? And all of a sudden you become this revolving door of questions and you're telling people what to do, which is transactional leadership.
Hmm.
And you can never truly scale because you can only scale as quickly as you can scale, and there's nothing left of you because you're already giving your all. That's why you hit the ceiling.
Yeah.
So if you want something done, you have to do it yourself. Wrong. If you want something done right, you have to find a who for the how. Tony Robbins talks about this all the time. He calls it the tyranny of how. Like when we have a goal or an outcome in a business or in life that we want to accomplish, the first question, if you think about it, we always ask is, how? How can I do that?
Yeah.
It's exactly the wrong question. The better question is who. Like Benjamin Hardy also wrote a book called Who Not How about this, where
Mhm.
when you're asking who, all of a sudden now you're shifting things from you to somebody else. The problem with like the hustling is you're taking everything on yourself and you're trying to like build this thing, and all of a sudden you become strapped because you're constantly trading time for money. There's just no time left, and that's when burnout happens. Plus, a
Mhm.
lot of it, I can tell you right now, is what I call empty activity.
Mm.
Empty activity is like running on a treadmill. The problem is empty activity is a great liar because you feel this false sense of movement. It's like when you're running on a treadmill, you feel like you're getting exercise, right? You're getting exercise. Your heart's moving. This is great. This is awesome. And then you step off only to find that you haven't actually moved an inch. You're still in the
Yes.
same place, but it felt like you had because you're doing the same exact motion as if you were running outside, but actually getting somewhere. Have you ever like done things all day long only to find out at the end of the day you didn't get anything done?
It's the worst feeling ever because it moves the goalpost out and reinforces once again the exact opposite of what you're like doing so much towards. Yeah, total.
So we use a framework to help like create a filter. A lot of people talk about goals, and by the way, goals, the traditional way is traditionally a terrible way to get something accomplished. I don't mean that it's better to have a goal than to not have a goal because you can't hit a target you can't see.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is that the traditional way of setting goals doesn't really work very well. In fact, if you look at studies as high as like 8% of people that actually set goals accomplish goals. Like, for example, if I told you that, hey, you can invest in this new project and there's an 8% chance you're going to be successful, how much money would you give me? Zero. Right. I'm going to potentially lose 92% of my money.
Right.
That's what happens with goals. And the reason why is because when we're like setting goals, your conscious mind is the goal setter. I want to hit this target. I want to grow this business to 10 or $20 million a year.
Mhm.
I'm going to set this goal. And your subconscious mind is the goal getter.
Okay.
Here's the thing, like this hidden force that's controlling your life is something that a lot of times you're just not aware of. So it's kind of like my conscious mind says, let's go, let's hit the gas.
Yep.
And your subconscious mind says, brakes.
Next Monday.
The gas and the brakes. It's even worse than next Monday. It is, you've never hit $10 million a year in your life. And you said this last year and the year before and the year before, and you still have never hit $10 million. And there's no way you're going to hit this year. So your conscious mind saying, I'm going to crush it. I'm going to hustle. I'm going to hit 10 million. And your subconscious mind says, no, guess which one wins 100% of the time?
Subconscious, always.
The engine. Yep. The subconscious.
It's a very similar process I take my clients through too, is when they come to me and they have this self-sabotage loop, we look at where is all the historic evidence of the times your subconscious mind has confirmed that you didn't follow through on the thing, or you've tried it and stopped, or you've tried it and fell off the bandwagon, or you tried it and didn't reach it, or you tried it and life happened and something sabotaged you, right? So we look at all of those associations that reinforce the belief like, okay, even though I want this, I'm not going to do it, before we actually coach them on choosing differently.
Yeah.
So moving forward, what is the number one rule of thumb that you've seen create miracles for people in terms of becoming the future self, right? Or the version of them that is required in order to hold, say, what they actually want?
And that's an easy answer. It's when they finally break the belief in thinking about they are who they're not. Most of us, when we think about ourselves, we're kind of our harshest critic. We say things to ourselves we never say to our worst enemy. It's amazing when you truly listen to the conversations you're having in your mind, what you're actually saying about yourself. And and we sort of convince ourselves sometimes that we're someone we're not because we feel like we need to be a certain way because our culture demands it.
Right.
When the reality is you're moving far away from your authentic self, and it's really tough to be successful, especially in business, if you're someone you're not. And one of the things about breaking your beliefs about that is that when we reset people to the core of who they are, and then we can make them become their best self.
Yeah.
It's like magical. It's the craziest thing versus like, a lot of people will use a strategy or a tactic and tool, and it works for this really successful person and he's teaching us, and all of a sudden they try to implement it and it doesn't work at all. That's usually why, is because they're implementing from a different space than that person is implementing from. So when you talk about like breaking beliefs, there was actually a study done. I don't know if you've heard about the study. They took 300 entrepreneurs and they took all of the disempowering, what we call limiting beliefs, things that were holding them back.
Okay. Like I'm not good enough kind of thing?
Exactly.
Okay.
And they wanted to fact check them. In other words, they studied their lives. And so they wrote down all the statements that their mind was telling them, right? That I'm not worthy of this thing. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not as good as this guy. I don't really have what it takes. I'm terrible at math. So how can I run the financials of my business? Whatever it is. and they fact checked whether or not these statements were factually true about this person. It's a really cool study because it's the only study I've ever seen that had an absolute result, meaning they found that when they studied their lies versus what the self-talk limiting beliefs were, or I
Oh,
should say limiting beliefs reinforced by self-talks, they found out that 100% of the time, their limiting beliefs were factually false about them. They weren't true at all. In other words, the
okay.
stories that we tell ourselves,
Mhm.
generally speaking, are lies. They're like, and I get it because society tells us, like, if you came to me and you're like, Erik, I'm the best coach in the world. I'm amazing. I'm awesome. Like, what would society do? Well, she's cocky. She's arrogant. I don't want to work with
Too
her.
much. Yeah.
What happens when a 5-year-old does that? I'm awesome, dad. Yeah, you are. You're freaking awesome. Right.
Right.
And all of a sudden, though, we knock ourselves down to a level lower than we actually are. I
It's like a
believe
false
in,
humility. Yeah.
yeah. And so one of the things that we have to do is break those beliefs. And by
Mhm.
the way, there's so many of them. I'm going to tell you some, just from general societal beliefs. And by the way, different cultures have different ones as well. I've
Mhm.
been to 28 countries now in my life, and I've seen different cultures and different beliefs. And we think another country's weird, and they think we're weird, and it's just
Yep.
because it's different programming. Money doesn't grow on trees. Total lie. Ask a
Yeah.
farmer.
Literally gets printed.
It literally gets printed on trees. A
Yeah.
farmer can sell a tree. You can sell a tree for money. You can sell the fruit for money. So literally, money grows on trees. Here's another one. Um, the grass is greener on the other side. Totally not true. It's only
Mm.
greener where you plant it, feed it, water it, cultivate it, right? So multiply that by all these beliefs that we tell ourselves. We have between 65 and 85,000 thoughts per day. By the
Mm.
way, over 80% of them are negative.
Are you
And then we also
serious?
repeat those same thoughts over and over from the past. So we live in automation most of the time. And automation in your mind, by the way, is a blessing because it allows you to drive and think about something totally else without crashing your car. Have you
You
ever
finally
driven
get
like
home
2 or 3
safe.
miles and be like,
How
and
did I
kind
get
of
here?
up, like, how did I how am I
Yeah.
alive here? Yeah.
Right.
That's your beliefs. And this is how it forms. Like you have a thought, like let me put it this way. When you're young, especially, which is where most of our beliefs were formed, you have this experience that you go through, good or bad. You form a meaning surrounding that experience at an age where you have
Mhm.
no context to what it actually means.
Mhm.
Then you tell your story about that. So let's say, dad leaves and you're 4 years old and
Mhm.
you never see him again. And you think, oh, it was me. And so you
Mhm.
blame yourself. And then you don't get close to any, relationships in the future because your dad left you, which means if I get close to a guy, then he's going to leave me too.
Yeah, I'll be
And so
abandoned.
you
Yep.
tell the story, which, by the way, that story and that belief didn't come from you. It came from an experience that you created that didn't have any context when you're that young. And
Mm.
so all of a sudden, your future relationships are damaged because of what happened when you're a child, because of that belief.
Yeah.
If you can go in there and break that belief and then change your story, it literally can rewire your brain. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but that's essentially how it works.
It's crazy too how those beliefs running, right? Then we end up being the own culprit. So in other words, that taking that woman, right? She has the abandonment trauma, and then she manifests unavailable partner, people that always leave because she's telling herself the story that maybe wasn't even real in the first place. Maybe she just associated two and two together because she didn't have somebody who was there for her to give her context that dad couldn't, I don't know, be accountable for this, or he had his own stuff going on. So it's funny how sometimes we can also be the perpetrator by creating more of exactly what we're trying to get rid of.
And the
Love that.
problem with the brain is, and this is one of the hardest things hardest truths that we have to learn, and that is your brain will always go and find evidence to support that your belief is true,
Yeah.
whether or not it's factually true. It doesn't matter what you plant into your brain, it will grow it. So
Mm.
you plant a belief that's going to hurt you in the future, like in
Yeah.
the relationship scenario. Well, guess what? You will then see evidence all over the place of broken relationships, guys that
Yeah.
leave your life, and you will find it, and you will self-sabotage to fit the narrative subconsciously. Not even have you ever had something that all of a sudden, like whenever you reach this level of success, it just blows up?
Mm.
That's self-sabotage, and you're not even recognizing it.
It's
So
like the
when you
part of
start
us craves control, so we'd rather do it or play into it ourselves rather than let it happen to us, even though it's the exact same thing.
exactly.
Huh.
And this happens automatically, and it's challenging, especially when I'm working with clients and I see this pattern.
Yeah.
I immediately start working with them to break their beliefs and really get into the foundation of what it is, and then change that story. You have a thought, and you see an experience, you form a meaning, the meaning forms a
Mhm.
story, then you have a belief, and then all of a sudden that affects your actions. So, for example, if you believe that rich people are evil, I can promise you, you will never be rich or wealthy
Yeah.
because you're not evil. See how you've linked, say most people, a lot of people believe that.
Yeah.
You've linked the two, then you're going to find evidence to support that rich people are evil, and you can find it. You
For
know,
sure.
or-
It's an amplifier.
and I'll just say one more thing on this. Like, I ask my audiences in speeches sometimes, like, how many of you can find evidence to support the belief that most people or a lot of people are bad in the world? Yeah, I can. Yeah, I usually every hand goes up, right? And then I'll
Yeah.
say, how many of you can find evidence to support that most people are good and are kind and will help you out if needed? Every hand goes up. Okay, you raised your hand in both situations. Which one is true?
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It's the one you believe is true, because that's how you're going to live your life from that lens. So I stopped teaching true versus untrue, because it's a rabbit hole. Like, I mean, what's truth, right? It's a
Mhm.
rabbit hole you don't really want to go down. I found something that's so much more impactful, and that is, will this empower me or
Mhm.
disempower me? Will this help me or hurt me? Will this, if I believe that most people are bad, is that going to help me or
Mhm.
hurt? uh, you're probably going to have a hard time trusting people,
Yeah.
building relationships. And if you don't trust people, you're never going to have true connection. Or if you believe that most people are good, yes, there's dangers in that. You could get taken advantage of, but at least you're going to see the world through a lens of positivity and optimism, which can open doors for you.
It's great. So in other words, what I'm hearing is reminding yourself that we can die on a hill, on our deathbed, like confirming something to be true. But what's more important, being right about that and finding all the reasons why, or being flexible in ongoing
Yeah.
beliefs or like relative moments of truth. For one moment in my entrepreneurial journey, working hard was absolutely essential. Now I'm actually trying to unlearn that, right? So we have to understand that just the way that nature has seasons, there's going to be seasons of life, and certain parts will require different versions of you, but it doesn't have to be fixed for the entire time. Like it can evolve.
Yeah, and it can evolve, and in a sense, it has to evolve. And if you know that most of these disempowering beliefs that you have
Yeah.
are actually false,
Mhm.
you can realize that most of the time, the opposite story you've been telling yourself is actually the one that's true.
Yeah.
The two biggest ones, when you really dive down to, I'm going to get even the meat here. Are you okay with that, Melissa? Would that be okay?
Please, Rad. Yes, I'm
When
all for it.
when you really dive down to the meat, there's really just a couple of core beliefs that are the foundation of disempowering beliefs that are the
Mhm.
foundation of all this. And it comes down to a couple things. Number one, I don't deserve it and I'm not worthy.
Mhm.
And if, Tony Robbins takes us a further, he says that one of the deepest human, or the deepest human fear, is that if I'm not worthy, I'm not loved. And he's right, because I promise you, you will never make a dime more than you believe you deserve. You will
Yep.
never build a business more successful than you believe you deserve. Sounds weird,
Yep.
but it's because your brain stops you through micro actions, because your subconscious is driving the bus. It is the
Yep.
one. It's not your conscious mind. You think you're in charge of your life. You're not. Your subconscious mind. That's why you have to change your stories in order for your subconscious mind to really connect to that over time. And then all of a sudden, you can start believing that you absolutely deserve that level of success.
I had an experience like this actually just this week. So we had like a little family. We did like an elf dinner with the little one, and my daughter put on one of those YouTube backgrounds, and it was this like huge. I don't even want to say log cabin because it was a villa. Like it was a gigantic thing with a fire burning and gorgeous architecture. And I looked at the screen. I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. And then I was like, I wonder what it would take to have something like this, right? A winter vacation home. And immediately my body like pinged me. So I tapped into the sensation, and it was like a unworthiness. And for a second I was like, oh, okay. So I started to unravel. Okay, when's the first time I bought and sold the idea that I was unworthy? But then I stopped myself and I was like, wait a second, do I actually believe that I'm unworthy of this? And I was like, no. So it was almost like this ingrained thing of something that I assumed was true just because I picked it up somewhere, but it didn't even like if I consciously think about it, of course I do think I'm worthy of that, right? And I hope everyone does. But the brain can also do funny things in terms of creating sort of false memories, right? Or false perceptions based on the filters. Now, I don't have the same good names as the studies as you do, and I'll have to maybe figure it out and fact check what it was. But they did a study around, there was a university lecture hall, right? And somebody came in with like a real, like a mask and really like angry energy, and he pointed and tried to hold down the students in the lecture hall unexpectedly. It was a psychological study. And then fake police came in to take interviews. Okay, what did you see? What were they wearing? What kind of gun was it? And people were reporting like, oh, it was a Glock, it was an AK-47, or whatever the guns are called. And afterwards, they replayed the footage to the classroom. It was actually a banana. But they, in their mind, had conceptualized through the emotional charge, which again reinforces our subconscious belief. It's always a belief combined with an emotion that makes it stick or makes it meaningful, that their brain had actually fabricated stuff just to match what they thought was true because it was so, emotional. So a lot of those times in our life when we're looking back, it may not have actually been the truth. It may have been something that fit the picture that we've just put in as a puzzle piece that we end up being bound by, which is insane to think.
Have you ever seen the studies on crime scenes? That's similar
No.
to this, right? Is that there's a reason why the police detectives immediately, like if somebody's in the hospital hurt from this, they'll go and interview them, because the percentage of memory, like shifting what actually happened, goes down significantly after a week. And I think
Wow.
it's like a year later, we remember accurately. It's less than 50%. I know that. I
Yeah.
remember like I spent a couple of years in South America when I was 20, 21. And I went back in 2018. What was
Mhm.
that? Gosh, 15, 16 years later. And I remembered these cities when I got there totally different than I remembered. I
Oh,
mean, parts
weird.
of them were accurate, but I remember this beautiful waterfall that I visited. And I actually went there with my wife and my son at the time was 2 years old. I took him as well. This was in Chile in South America. And I went to this beautiful waterfall. And I remember I'd been there twice before, totally different than I remembered it. When you think about that, if you're holding a grudge for something that happened with somebody,
Yes.
maybe you're not talking to your mom because of some conversation from 5 years ago, or a sister or a friend, or
Mhm.
you've held resentment for a long time,
Mhm.
chances are your brain is simply remembering a version of the story to fit the narrative to keep you safe
Mm.
from getting hurt like that again. Chances are most of what you're thinking is actually not true. And one of the things I think is really important is if we change our story, like think about it. In the case of a mom or a relationship, is the story you're telling yourself going to hurt you or help you? Like if you had that person back in your life,
Yeah.
and you had a really good relationship, could it enhance your life? Could it make you a better person? And especially
Mhm.
if you truly love deep down inside this person. And you know what's funny? Unfortunately, most of us find out way too late after somebody that we haven't talked to for a long time
Mm.
dies,
Yeah.
and then we grieve over it. What a tragedy, when that could have been solved in life and could have been in part of something that could enhance your life, but because of the story you're telling yourself,
You didn't even allow it.
disconnected you from that person for years.
It totally goes back to that piece that lit the fire under your ass, so to speak, that we talk about all the time, is making sure that when we're at the end, when we look back on it, that we can actually experience, oh my God, I really did it. I lived to the fullest. I really went for it, right? And that also incorporates like the relationships and the forgivenesses. One of the things we were actually chatting about, my fiance and I today, were about reconciling 2020, 2025 before 2026, right? And we have these goals and these tasks and to-do lists and getting rid of some of the stuff that we just are not moving forward with. But Jesse Itzler talks about ways to kind of energetically declutter, right, your mind before the holidays. And one of the things that I love to do in my life and business is actually energetically reconcile and forgive
Ooh,
any of the mistakes I
wow.
made this year, right? Any of the business mishaps, and then take a look at, okay, what worked well? What can I recreate? What did I love? What would I like? What did I try? And okay, it's good that I did it, but I like don't want to ever do that again. And really just make peace with it. So it doesn't have to come as baggage, but I can actually just extract the wisdom, which is usually where the power is, rather than seeing it as something that quote unquote happened to me.
Yeah, oh, I love that. I might have to steal that one from you. That's good.
Please, please. So we talked about a lot here, and you are a wealth of information and resources. I just love the heart-driven approach. If you had a moment to share, I guess, your number one message, right? And of course, we'll explore ways that people can connect with you and go deeper. But if you had a billboard, right, to the world and on this talk, what is the number one thing you want, humanity to know that would create the biggest ripple effect for them?
Well, I think one of the saddest places on earth is the graveyard, not necessarily because people die, that's sad enough alone, but because I think that's where unrealized potential
Mm.
never gets reborn. Um, I think regret especially when you're later in life, is going to be one of the biggest challenges in life, and just thinking about a life that you could have had, like, to me, I know, like, the biggest thing that scares me the most is that I'll die not having accomplished and realized the life I was meant to live. You
Oh,
know,
yeah, that
this is
resonates.
attributed to Mark Twain, although there's differing opinions of whether or not this came from him, but he said that 2 greatest days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And I truly believe, like, one of my callings is to wake up men and women to their potential and help them rise to it. If you're someone out there that you feel like you're, like, called for more, but you're stuck in some situation or in a 9 to 5 or stuck in your own head and fearful of what that could look like, I'm here not to call you out, but to call you up. Because there's a reason. One of my friends who I had a podcast with, her name is Elise Archer. She's amazing. And she said something that I'll never forget. She said, desire put in our hearts is a green light. Call it from God, call it
Mm.
from the universe, call it whatever you want to call it, but as a green light. And if you have a desire and you're feeling like pulled to do something great,
Yeah.
that's when you've got to go. This is sort of paraphrasing a little bit, but Winston Churchill said that there comes in a time in your life when you will be figuratively tapped on the shoulder to do some great thing. And what a tragedy it would be if at that time you found yourself unqualified or unprepared. And to me, that's it, is when you're feeling that call to rise, even if you don't, maybe somewhat don't believe or doubt that you can actually become this person, actually have this dream life, actually change lives and make an impact in the world,
Yeah.
take the green light and put on the gas. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, but I promise you, like, you'll be looking back 5 or 6 years from now and saying, I'm living an impossible life. That's what I want for the world. That's what I want for everyone, is to be their best self. And when you're your best self, you're living in alignment with who you are, your purpose. And that to me is where true, absolute fulfillment comes.
It's incredible. It's a sacred technology too. This way that we're drawn to follow our excitement or what fills us, the thing that makes time stand still, right? And funnily enough, there's this sort of divine orchestration component to it that it usually brings in the exact people, the exact opportunities, the exact things that the world needs more of that are unique to you, that only you came here to do. Like that is your mark, right? So what better way to allow ourselves the full fuck yes life by treating ourselves to spending our time doing the things that we love the most because there is a greater purpose, or even just following it to see, okay, if I were to give this a go, right, what could open up for me? And I remember in my career, I was resisting speaking, and that was, after getting different hypnosis sessions and seeing it in meditation, you get glimpses of your purpose, right? In these flashes. And I couldn't even like use the excuse that I didn't know what my purpose was because it was handed to me on a silver platter by my guides, right? By higher self. And I see these glimpses. So then was the resistance of literally me just refusing to do it because I was scared, right? Or because I didn't know if it was going to work. And I had this come to God moment where I was laying in bed and I was like, how many more years am I going to sit here to avoid the thing that most people are searching their entire life to go find? And I have crystal clear clarity on what it is. And I'm doing it because I'm afraid of failure, because I'm afraid it might not work out. Like that was, that was it was a really strong band-aid moment. So you phrased it quite well. So really trusting that it is connected to something bigger and that you can allow yourself to enjoy that by, really just going for it. And also discovering in increments that maybe you are more capable than you thought, which can only come through action, right?
Yes,
Beautiful.
absolutely.
This
Well
was
said.
wonderful. I absolutely loved our chat, Eric. You have so much goodness to offer the world. And I know people will be very curious to figure out how they can connect with you. So tell me about this free gift.
Yes. So I wrote a book called Commit First. I'm actually in the process of writing a book, surprise, called Belief Breaking right now.
Love it.
But if you go to my Instagram and follow me and then DM me the word commit, we'll
Commit.
send you a hard copy of Commit First. And we've got some other little goodies that will go with that too. So
That
yeah,
is amazing.
and it's at Erik Sorenson, just like it says on the screen there. And that's my Instagram channel or handle. So hopefully we'll have some good conversations.
what a general gift. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today. This is a great chat. And thank you guys for everyone tuning in. You'll be able to find Erik's details in the comments there and further connect with him. All right. Take care, everyone.